And now we've gone beyond farming, and now we're into processing. Originally, we started off in grain for food and for seed oil, because hemp's got some awesome nutritional qualities that just unique to hemp. And then in 2019, we got into hemp fiber. And if you look at what hemp can do in the fiber industry, and fiber is a lot of things, and what it can do for environmental impact, and folks were interested in understanding how hemp could help with carbon sequestration. And there's discussions, as you know, about carbon markets and trying to get some kind of carbon credits. Hemp has tremendous biomass potential, and what all that means for carbon credits and carbon offsets. So it was very interesting.
In this episode of Re.Vert Ventures, we speak with Ken Elliott, the founder of IND Hemp, the largest source of industrial hemp food, feed, and fiber in the United States. Based in Montana, we hear Ken's story of going from the environmental services sector to discovering the restorative properties of growing hemp. From there, he decides to go full in on this venture and the magic crop and grow his industrial hemp business to becoming one of the largest in the United States. We hear about his mission and God-led journey, the goodness of hemp, and its impact on the environment and the community surrounding it, the challenges of working in the hemp industry, and of course his advice for anyone entering this burgeoning business. Enjoy. How does Ken Elliott get into the hemp world? How did that start?
That's crazy, isn't it? And so it goes all the way back, But I'm 65, so I had a great, awesome career in the environmental business. Mm-hmm. And when I got out of college, I've got a couple degrees in geology. So I actually got out of school. I went to University of Missouri, and got a master's degree in geology. And this was back in the early 80s. And of course, back in the early 80s, it was all about oil, right? It's still all about oil. But anyway, so I got out, got a job in Oklahoma and Texas working in the oil fields. And that's when the price of barrel of oil was like less than $20 a barrel, right? And, anybody in the industry was struggling. And because I just got out of school, I just bounced from one company to another company, and they were all just folding up. And fortunately for me, the environmental industry was just opening up. And so I stumbled into that because, man, Ken needed a job, had a new wife, I got a new baby, I guess. And so it was like, hey, man, I got to do what I got to do, right? And so got in the environmental business and was really engaged with some very, very cool projects, big projects, real environmental projects. Today, some of the environmental projects are, well, we got to test the groundwater. We got to clean up some soil. But, when I was in it, it was Times Beach, and it was Love Canal, and it was the Cuyahoga River catching fire. Things were, it was different. It was exciting. And so I spent 30 years in the environmental business, cleaning places up, and got into all kinds of different aspects of environmental stuff, industrial, commercial, mining. It was an awesome career. Learned a lot of things. And so back to the question, how's Ken get into hemp, right? This was back in 2011. I was down in Mexico working on a really cool mining project, right? And I've got a friend of mine, Gary, who is in the oil and gas business. And he calls me and said, hey, Ken, you do stuff with those contaminated properties. Can you find me a contaminated property up near Williston, up in North Dakota? Because this was the Bakken oil field was really opening up. And there was just no infrastructure, no place for him to put a company. And so he was hoping I could find a place that we could go clean up, and then he'd have a place to build a company and that kind of stuff. And it never happened that way. We just couldn't find a place in North Dakota. Just wasn't enough industrial applications to create any mess that we could take advantage of. But I did, and I'm doing this all in Mexico, right? So I go online, and I find there's no place in North Dakota that works, but I bounced over to northeast Montana, and I found an old oil refinery on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation in Wolf Point, Montana. And so I called the guy. It's 110 acres. 110 acres. I called the dude and I said, hey, you interested in keeping your property? You want to divest this property? He goes, man, I want out of this thing. Because this guy had purchased it. I think he picked it up for nothing from the oil company that went bankrupt. And he just ended up getting the property, and he ended up starting to tear down some of the oil tanks and cutting it up for metal. And he was making a little money on salvage. But he started getting some letters from the EPA saying, hey, when are you going to clean your place up? So he wanted out of it as quick as he can. And for me and my purpose, it was like, hey, I'll set up a company, we'll purchase the property, and then we'll reach out to the folks who made the mess and see if they want to work with us on cleaning the site up. And so that started a journey that was 3 or 4 or 5 years long, working with the tribes in Northeast Montana, the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, and the responsible parties who left the mess there. And anyway, what ended up happening, it was challenging to get the responsible parties to come back to the table. They were happy with leaving that sleeping dog lie, right? And so I kept pushing forward, trying to figure out how to do things. And so in 2012, it's like, well, Ken, you're responsible for cleaning this place up. You better come up with a plan, because the EPA wanted to know, and the state of Montana wanted to know what we're going to do. And Ken didn't have a clue. So I looked at, and there was significant contamination there. And I still own the site. There's still significant contamination. The responsible parties have come back to the table. We're cleaning the site up now. But the plan was, like Chernobyl was a mess. And apparently hemp helped clean that up, right? So from my standpoint, it's like, that's my play. I'm going to do hemp. Well, you couldn't do hemp back in 2012, right?
It was illegal because it was illegal because it was illegal to grow, period, in the state.
Yeah, still marijuana.
Yeah.
Right? So, but from my standpoint, dealing with the environmental regulators is like, hey, that's my plan. And they're saying, well, it's illegal. I said, I don't care what's legal and what's not. It worked over in Chernobyl. It ought to work here. And so they had a hard time arguing that, right?
Is this the EPA or what organization was preventing you or was saying you can't grow this?
The EPA and the state of Montana Department of Environmental Quality, right? And you couldn't grow. I couldn't even import seeds, right? Well, in 2013, 2014, the Farm Bill then allowed for us to start doing some research. And so I applied for a permit and got a permit. And then I was able to import seeds from Canada. Got some seeds from Canada. And then I think in 2015, maybe, I planted seeds. And I didn't know nothing about hemp, right? I mean, nothing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wasn't even a farmer, right? And I'm up here, and it's Northeast Montana is a tough place to farm. That didn't matter. I didn't know enough to know I couldn't do it, right? Yeah. So I got the seeds, and I found a local farmer that would work with me, Jim Marmon, Jim and I, and Mary Lou Miller up there, and we all started trying to figure out how to get hemp to grow. And it was miserable. If we did this for 2 or 3 years, we were never too damn successful, right? But we were still doing it. Yeah. And so it's like, yeah, maybe we're not successful, but we're the only ones out there doing anything.
Yeah.
So
and this is always on that plot of land that you had identified and purchased before, correct?
Yeah, this is on that 110 acres of. It's called the former Kenco refinery site, and it was a state Superfund site. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I got into hemp. And then of course the hemp industry kind of opened up, right?
To that point, so you spent 2 or 3 years trying to grow a successful crop of hemp with the intention of doing so to clean the soil and clean the land that had otherwise been polluted by the oil industry. Yeah. What were you doing professionally during that time? How are you making money?
That was that was also a crazy story. Yeah. Like I said, I had 30 years of a career in the environmental business. Mm-hmm. That's pretty successful. I had a little bit of money put away. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we were living, and my wife and I, and my wife then was Jana. And Jana and I were living in Colorado up in the mountains. That was our forever home, beautiful place, just awesome place. And I'm driving back and forth to Montana on an Indian reservation. And unless you've spent any time on an Indian reservation, It's tough.
Yeah.
Not a lot of opportunities. Socioeconomics of the place don't look very appealing.
Mhm.
But I'm out there trying to do some things, trying to work with the tribe, and of course nobody's paying me. But that's okay. And we're doing this thing on our own because we think it's good. And I'm working with folks who are trying to help me put together a strategy for cleaning the site up. I'm trying to get the responsible parties to come back. I'm dealing with the tribe, trying to explain to them where the economic opportunities are. And at that point, the goal was to create a clean energy refinery to take advantage of the Bakken oil. Right? That was the option. And there was people interested in doing that. We had some folks interested in building a new refinery. There was a $600 million investment, and so it was a really cool project. Um, that didn't happen. Tribe had a hard time understanding how it was all going to come to pass, and so it was just more challenging than it was worth. And gosh, after 2 or 3 or 4 years, just became very difficult. And then my wife Jana at that point said, "Hey, how about if I come up to Montana and we're going to give this one more year? And at the end of one more year, this is either going to work or we're moving back to Colorado." And I said, "Absolutely, let's do it with one more year." And so she moved up there to become a teacher while I'm working on this thing. And she had a big heart for the kids up there. And at the end of that year, I don't know if that was 2014 or 15. Years kind of run together. She says, "You know what? This is a good thing what we're doing up here." So we ended up selling our house and our forever house in Colorado and moving up to a reservation in northeast Montana. And I continued to do what I'm doing. I'm working, odd environmental jobs, trying to make a little bit of money. My wife's working as a teacher at a Indian school there in Wolf Point, Montana. I'm doing substitute teaching to help where I can. And so, and we're fully engaged with the community and that lifestyle. And
I'm
it was
trying to
good.
make this hemp crop, the hemp field work. And
What's that?
you're trying to make this
Trying to make it work. Yep. Trying to
field
make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What-
So,
what
and
was-
I've got some other farmers engaged in it. They're trying to plant it in their fields. And ain't nobody know how to do this stuff, right?
What makes it so difficult to plant? So is it because the ground is so cold?
Because up where we're at, everybody grows wheat or barley, right? And everybody knows how to grow wheat or barley. Well, it became really clear hemp ain't wheat and barley. So these guys, I plant my wheat down an inch or whatever it is, right? And we talked to people up in Canada. They said, "No, you plant wheat a half inch deep, or not wheat. You plant your hemp a half inch deep, and you plant it when the temperature of the soil is a certain temperature." And of course these wheat farmers didn't listen to me, and so they would they would do it the way they always do, and it failed. And then on top of that, where we grow hemp up there, the moisture up there, we get about 12 inches of moisture a year, which is not a lot. And in the summer it's 100 degrees, and in the winter it's 50 below zero. It's very challenging. So we're just trying to figure out the weather. We're trying to figure out how the agronomy works and which genetics to use. And oh, by the way, you got no control over how much moisture you get. I remember one time we planted in May, and it didn't rain until September. So we plant in May, and it doesn't have a drop of moisture till September. But as soon as it rains, the crop comes out of the ground, right? The seeds pop open, and the hemp starts to grow. Well, it's in September. We've got less than 30 days before everything freezes. So that was another unsuccessful year.
Okay.
And that had to do with just the moisture. So, the first few years, and arguably we still have those years, we're just trying to figure out what's going on and trying to train other folks. And now we've gone beyond farming, and now we're into processing. Originally, we started off in grain for food and for seed oil, because hemp's got some awesome nutritional qualities that just unique to hemp. And then in 2019, we got into hemp fiber. And if you look at what hemp can do in the fiber industry, and fiber is a lot of things, and what it can do for environmental impact and and folks were interested in understanding how hemp could help with carbon sequestration. And there's discussions, as you know, about carbon markets and trying to get some kind of carbon credits. Hemp has tremendous biomass potential, and what all that means for carbon credits and carbon offsets. So it was very interesting, and so our company is growing. My daughter ended up joining us, I think, back in 2018, and along the way in 2016, my wife Gianna was killed in a car accident. So I'm up there on the Indian reservation. My wife is killed in Denver, Colorado, and so it's like, man, who'd have thought? Who'd have thunk, right? Who'd have thought that was a thing? Not me. And this, and one of the things I tell people, this hemp journey for me is, it's a God journey for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why did God take us down this path, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're a family of faith, and we weren't sure where this was going, but it was like, we're going anyway.
Yeah.
And so I'm up there in 2016 when Janet dies. And for the next 2 years, I'm up there by myself. And so that's all part of my journey. We're fully engaged and committed, and we love all the people that we get to meet and work with in this industry. And at the end of the day, again, it's this God journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think it's good for us. We think it's good for others.
But did you see the writing on the wall about how hemp and cannabinoids and cannabis as a plant, how perception of that was changing? Did you see this sort of business opportunity from a purely economic standpoint, from a business standpoint, and as an entrepreneur? You must have seen the tide shifting towards this and the applicability of this crop in so many different fields as a solution to a lot of problems.
Yeah. And as an entrepreneur, especially a young guy like you, right? It's like, man, if you're into it, make sure you're into it for the right reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're young, a lot of times the right reason is I can make a lot of money, right? Well, money and value, what's important to you, don't necessarily jive. We talked about wisdom earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You'll figure that out as you get a little older, right? When you're
Mm-hmm.
younger, you think, man, I can make a bunch of money and all the stuff I can get with money, and you can convince yourself that money's a good thing, right? And money's not a bad thing, but it can't be the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people who start companies and entrepreneurs in general, there's a money aspect to it, and it has to be a money aspect to it, right? But that can't be what motivates you to get up in the morning, right? So for us, it was, this hemp thing is a good thing. And I was on the reservation, so it was very obvious that this hemp thing could provide opportunity for people on this Indian reservation in northeast Montana. And then the more we got into it, we looked at the food aspect of it and also the fiber aspect of it. And of course, the cannabinoid thing came up, right? And this was back in 2018, 2019, when CBDs, everybody was in on that, right? Everybody thought they were going to make bank. Remember?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Every
Yeah.
product had a CBD alternative to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was not about, I'm going to do good, right? I'm going to make bank.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important lesson for all of us to remember. It's like, don't get into something because you think you're going to make a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
because the money, like in CBDs, it ran out, right?
Mm-hmm.
It ran out, and it ruined a lot of farmers. It ruined a lot of people in the CBD business, and it hurt our industry, industrial hemp industry, and it still hurts everybody. When I go to talk to people, and I was just in Africa last couple of weeks, and when you go over there and you talk to people there, or you talk to people here, when you mention you're into hemp, of course they think you are into marijuana, or at least you're into that CBD thing. And if you're into that CBD thing, well, you know, there's all kinds of issues there. It's easier to say no. I don't want nothing to do with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the cannabinoid markets, I think, hurt us. They still hurt us, and I think with the upcoming farm bill, I'm hopeful that the USDA will separate the grain and fiber end of things
Mm-hmm.
from the cannabinoid end of things.
Mm-hmm.
Let us do the food and the fiber, the feed and the environmental stuff on the one end of things, and the folks who want to use it for intoxicating purposes or medicinal things, work on convincing Congress and others that that CBDs and cannabinoids are good there, and they're very good there. It's just not our battle to carry. That's not ours.
I think you really hit on a really good point that I would love for you to maybe articulate to our listeners the difference between your crops, your hemp crops, and a hemp or a cannabinoid plant that gets someone high off THC. Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions. As you said, you say to someone, I work in hemp, they think you're selling a plant that gets people high, but there's a clear difference. And I think there's a more technical difference between the types of strains that are within this family of crop. Maybe you could speak to what those differences are, just so that everyone can sort of be level set there.
Yeah, yeah. Um, we try to use the analogy of like tomato plants, right? You got all kinds of tomato plants. Some of them are yellow tomatoes, some are red tomatoes, right? Or dogs. You got the German Shepherd and you got a Pekingese, right? They're the same genus and species, right? But they've been bred differently to create different characteristics, and that is what cannabis is. And uh, our our crop, our industrial hemp, is Cannabis sativa L, and it is engineered. The genetics are such. Um, can you hold on here? Let me see. Can you see who's on the other? Can you see if she's in there? Just let her know that we're on the call. My wife's on another call. She's yeah. Um, anyway, the genetics for our food, for example, is engineered not to have cannabinoids, especially THC, right? Um, and THC, for hemp, if it's below 0.3% THC, it's not a cannabis issue, right? Those are the numbers. And if it's above zero point 0.3, now you got marijuana. And sometimes our genetics will go above zero point 0.3, and it's got something to do with the environmental impact, how much rain we got, how little rain we got, how much stress the crop had, right? So it's just that arbitrary number, this 0.3% THC, which is arbitrarily selected years ago, that makes the difference. And of course, um, if you're into the cannabinoids, be it marijuana or some of the CBDs, it's all about the flowers, right? The trichomes on the flowers, and then you pick those, and you process them, you smoke them, whatever you do, but you're interested in the trichomes on the flowers. Well, with our grain crops, for example, uh, our grain crop goes to flower, and then they're pollinated, and as soon as it's pollinated, then it goes to seed. And once the flowers are off the plant, you don't have a cannabinoid issue, right? You don't have any CBDs, and you have very, very little CBDs when it is in flower. So our grain has very little, if any, CBDs, and any CBDs we do find, it's just a result of the contamination of the previous flower on the plant. So that's grain, and then on our fiber end of things, um, I'm gonna suggest that people have never seen a marijuana plant or a CBD plant, right? What those things look like are a little bush, and it's got all kinds of flowers on it. And on the cannabinoid plants, whatever cannabinoid plant you got, you can have hundreds, you can have thousands of flowers on one plant, and it looks like a big old bush. It looks like a Christmas tree almost, right? It stands alone. You plant one plant, and then 3 feet away you plant another plant, and you get these crops, this plant that grows like a bush, and you harvest the flower. Well, and our grain plant's about that big, right? Maybe a little bigger, right? They grow up, and you get a big seed head on top, and there's no confusion there as to whether you're getting cannabis or you're getting grain, right? There's just no question. And then if you're looking at our fiber plants, we have our fiber plants, and we plant them about 1 million seeds per acre, so they're right on top of each other. And those plants are that big around, and they go 15 to 20 feet in the air. And so there's no confusion about that plant being a cannabis plant either. Um, so anyway, there's a whole lot more into it. We have agronomists who are you know, in our company, and we have all kinds of scientists. They can definitely do a better job of explaining it to you. But
Yeah.
from my standpoint, there's no confusion when you're looking at the crop, what you're dealing with.
As you launched IND Hemp. What was the initial? What was that transition period like? Were you taking? It sounds like you obviously put a lot of your own money towards this business. Did you take financial backers? Did you have to? Did you go a period without insurance? I'd love to understand how you sort of navigated that financial period of your time of your life.
Yeah, yeah, no, and all those things were true.
Mm,
It was, and during that period, like I said, I had a good nest egg from my previous career. Um, then somewhere in the process, we ended up selling our house in Colorado, and that that infused some more money into the deal. Um, but yeah, I mean, went years without any kind of significant income. Right, my wife was teaching on a reservation, so she's not making a whole lot of money.
mhm,
But while we're up there, we're not spending a lot of money either, right?
right,
And so we're keeping our costs down. At this point, I've got two kids, and they're out of the house, they're out of college, they're on their own. So we don't have those considerations. Um, but yeah, it's a big risk. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs and people who started up their own companies, and a lot of those folks who didn't make it right. I mean, they got the best intentions. Um, and I don't know if it's a business model they didn't have correct, or if their heart wasn't right, or if their motivation wasn't correct, whatever it was.
mhm,
um, you can be unsuccessful real easy. And for me, it was like, I'm in the hemp business and everybody thinks I'm in the marijuana business, right? So
yeah,
ain't nobody interested in helping. I had a couple bank accounts. I at one point, I still have a nonprofit group, and we were working with Wells Fargo. And when they found out I'm in hemp, they shut down my nonprofit. They shut me down. I don't think I can ever get an account with Wells Fargo again, right? Because I was in the M business, so
yeah,
it was all challenge. It was every aspect of it was challenging, right? So, but it was that's why I mentioned to you there's like a faith thing for us.
yeah,
It's like, man, just you can't know what you don't know, right?
yeah,
And we know very little. I mean, farming is a great example. When you go to a farming community, you'll find out a lot of people go to church on Sunday
that's
because
right.
it's like they don't know if it's going to rain or not. They just know it needs to rain.
Yeah,
And so, their faith walk is different than a lot of other places, and
totally.
it resonates with me, and I enjoy working and living in rural communities.
Absolutely. I think
Yeah,
there's something really spiritual almost when you're able to work with your hands and work with the soil and be one with nature in that regard. You really get to be, in my opinion, a bit closer to God than when you're
yeah,
man-made world with these types of artificial distractions. And
yeah,
there's a bit more. There's more of a human soul when you're out there in the country.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And we're focused on something, and we never got in it to make money, right?
Mm,
Never, because at that point there was no money in it. We were just sitting there trying to figure out how we can get this hemp thing to help clean up a refinery site.
yeah,
And then it was like, man, maybe we can create some jobs for the Native Americans up here on this reservation. And they don't need to make a lot of money, just a little bit of money because they don't have any money.
yeah,
And so we started off with small aspirations of where this could go. And then it just kind of kept growing and growing, and more people got interested in it. And then we started to appreciate the fact that this hemp thing is a real thing, especially since we started off in food to begin with. It's like, man, this stuff is good. It really is good. And then we live in a food desert in this country for the most part, right? We don't get. You take a look at the grocery stores. Everything we get from Southern California or Chile or someplace else. Nobody in Montana raises tomatoes, or lettuce. You know what I mean? That didn't happen,
yeah,
and it doesn't happen in Iowa. Unless you're growing your own tomatoes in your backyard, and nobody doing it for commercial.
yeah.
So anyway,
So
hemp as a food opportunity really resonated with us.
yeah. So was that the initial, let's say, product or service that you sold? Was selling hemp seeds for food?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And of course, you couldn't. There was no markets. The law wouldn't even let you do it, right? So
Mm,
it was like, holy smokes! There was no easy path.
yeah.
That just happened to be the path we were on. So we started working with the USDA and the Food and Drug Administration, and we started trying to figure out how good this stuff was. And we had some of our clients were like in South Korea because some of the foreign countries they know how good hemp is.
Hmm.
They it's when you take a look at the nutritional profile of hemp, it's like that's the best stuff you can eat. And there's people out there around the world who figured that out a long time ago. And if hemp's grown in the United States, that's even better. So, we started working with folks in the country, outside the country, and just trying to figure out how to make it work. I'm not sure we ever did or not, but
Well,
um,
you're moving and grooving. There's so many things that IND Hemp is involved in, and has your business has grown so much. And that's something I want to harp on for a second. Is you start by selling hemp seeds as food. How has your business model evolved to where it is now? Tell me about the evolution of your business model and different markets that you've entered with this incredible miracle crop.
yeah, we we ended up, I think, in 2019, 2020, we raised about 10,000 acres of hemp.
Mm-hmm.
Our farmers up here in Montana, and I think for the most part of it, it was 2019. I think it was most of it was grain. And then our farmers came to us and said, "Hey, what are we going to do with all this fiber that we're having in our fields? We process and get the grain off of this, but I got all this fiber, and hemp fiber is the longest, strongest fiber in nature, right? And from our farmer's standpoint, he said, we can't even cut this stuff with our disc. How am I going to grow wheat in here?" And it was like, and we didn't even know it was a problem
Yeah.
until it was a problem, right? And so we tried to understand better how to take care of that thing, and that's when we decided, hey, this hemp fiber thing, it takes care of a couple of problems. One is it helps us with our farmers who are so. In 2019, we got it into the fiber in a big way. Um, we look, and there was no fiber processors in the United States at that point. There was a company called Sunstrand down in Tennessee or Kentucky, and they had an operation going down there, and they were doing some hemp. And so I was like, man, let's go down and talk to them. And a guy named Trey Riddle, and Trey had Sunstrand, and they were, and he was a pioneer and doing some great things down there. Another guy, Chad Rosen, was doing food down there. I mean, Kentucky was a big thing back in 2018, 2019, but everybody's struggling. So we go down there and talk with Trey about his operations, and we look at his equipment, and he happens to be selling his equipment. And so it's like, dude, how about if we buy that from you and bring it up to Montana? And so we buy his equipment, and it's a LaRoche, a company out of France. LaRoche has this operating equipment, and as soon as we own it, somebody calls me and says, "Hey, I see you bought that LaRoche line. We sold that LaRoche line to Trey. Are you interested in a bigger one?" And it's like, dude, why didn't we have this conversation first, right? Yeah. So I told him, I said, if I can sell you trays, if you can, give me credit on trays, then we'll buy yours. And his happened to be a newer, better, bigger kind of line. Nice. And so we bought that, and then we brought it up to Montana. But we built a 52,000 square foot building, right? To put that in. Well, you can
process the hemp stalks into fiber.
Yeah. So, and you can imagine that was not cheap, and so we tried to, and internally we were trying to figure out how to make all this work, and we move things around, and we get it to work, So, and our family finance is a little different than most. I'm sure, most entrepreneurs and people starting business probably don't have the money in the bank to do it the way we did it, right? Mm-hmm. But they do it with courage and they just believe, and just gotta believe, and that's why lots of entrepreneurs are successful and startups are successful, but they don't all have the financial wherewithal to make it happen, and we just happened to, and that was a blessing.
So, a real blessing.
Yeah. So
you got this facility brought up. Now you've already sort of validated this market when it comes to hemp food, right? Yeah. Now you're building out this process to build hemp fiber.
Yeah. That was crazy. Yeah. That was crazy.
What's the next piece of the puzzle here?
Well, one is, we've only got so many people in our company, right? And so we decided, hey, well, let's throttle back how much we're doing in the grain into things. Let's focus on the fiber into things. And we ended up convincing Trey Riddle to join us and move to Montana. And Trey actually went to school in Montana, so I don't think we twisted his arm too much. But if you look at our company profile and you see something about Trey, Trey is absolutely, in my opinion, the smartest guy in the hemp field, in the hemp space in the United States. He is just brilliant, right? Yeah. So we got brilliant people, great people, and they've all bought into the story. And if you got people who are only in there for money, they don't care about your story, right? And so, I think you need to be careful with who you engage with and what motivates them.
Yeah.
And if you can't convince them that you've got a good story, then maybe they're not the right people for you, right? Because we're moving forward on Ken's story, whatever Ken's story is. And if you're a believer, then good. Now, if this isn't a Ken's story, this is just another way for you to make money. Well, there's thousands of different ways for you to make money. Why don't you just go find one of them, right? But we were able to convince people, I think, that hey, what we're trying to do is good, good for our health and good for our employees and our planet and communities we work in. And I think they bought into that, and they all work awfully hard because they see the vision as well.
To that point about you said the goodness in your story, I've heard you speak before on this, but the goodness of hemp, and I'm curious to know more about, again, for our listeners. I think everyone knows anecdotally that hemp is a miracle crop with all these different things, but I mean, we're not only is this crop something that can replace traditional fiber materials like cotton, which is extensively water intensive. It provides food, which is extremely nutritious in a way that sequesters carbon when it's planted, right? So there's so many different manners of it. Are there any other, let's say, benefits to the hemp crop? Maybe its position as a rotational crop. Like what is so good about this plant that people really need to understand?
Yeah. And we're working up for the most part in Montana, although we're all over right now. And so I've got to convince a wheat farmer that hemp's better than what he's doing, right? And everybody, whether you're into wheat and barley, corn, or soybeans, historically, especially the last 20, 30, 40 years, everybody's been concerned about yield, right? How much corn and soybeans, how much are you making? Because at the end of the day, if it's 100 bushel an acre or 200 bushels an acre, if you can squeeze out more bushels per acre, that's got to be a good thing. And I think, the ag chemical business will show you how to squeeze more yield per acre, right? And it's going to cost you. But that's okay because you're going to send me a check and pay for my ag chemicals, right? And I think farmers are good people, right? They are good people. All of them are entrepreneurs, right? They're all running their own business. They got their family that's with them on this ride, and it's very, very, very challenging to be a farmer.
Extremely.
It's extremely challenging, and we've got fewer and fewer
role in our economy, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, there's fewer and fewer farmers, right? And it's like, and then somehow we got to the point where we're not even growing food anymore. Nobody eats field corn, nobody eats soybeans, right? I mean, nobody eats that stuff. You might have tofu, maybe there's a little bit of food, but for the most part, that's all, cattle feed and pig feed, right? You know what I mean?
That's why beef is some of the highest carbon emissions associated with it, is because so much land has to be cut down and turned into crops like corn and soy that just then go into feeding cows and not even humans. So
yeah, crazy. And I mean, if you take a look at what's going on in Brazil in the Amazon rainforest, right? We are carving up that so that we can plant soybeans and feed cattle, and it's like that is not obvious. That's not sustainable, and that's certainly not.
No.
As far as being stewards of the land, and I think that's what farmers have always been. We've drifted away from that. We're not doing that anymore, right? We've made it so hard on farmers that they will do anything they have to do to pay their bills because they have to.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of pushed them into a corner. It's like, hey, you got to buy my chemicals, and you got to spray with glyphosate, And oh boy, this atrazine is some pretty good stuff. Don't touch it, don't drink it, don't breathe it, but it's some pretty good stuff. And then and we've got some synthetic fertilizers that you're gonna love, right? And don't worry about the fact that we're gonna kill all the bugs in the soil. Just keep buying more chemicals from us, right? Um, and I think when it all started, after World War II, we needed to make production. We at that point we needed to feed the world, right? And it made good sense. And we just kind of lost our way uh, from an agricultural industry standpoint.
Yes.
And hopefully, hemp can help us get regrounded. And so, your question, well, all the goodness of hemp, and man, hemp has got tremendous. Every time we look at hemp from a different perspective, it's like, man, oh man, look at that. So, just from a straight up food perspective, right? What really excited me about from a foods perspective, the amino acid profile and the protein that's associated with hemp as a food, amazing. And we're working with some people who think they can do some amazing things with it. Some meat analogs, and that's and meat analogs has kind of got a bad reputation because people are trying to figure out how to do it for the first time. So you get this almost meat stuff, and it ain't quite meat stuff, is what it really is. And we're working with those guys, and they're trying real hard, trying to do some things so we don't have to raise so much beef, and we don't have to make so much synthetic fertilizer. That when you look at what fertilizer does to our environment, once you pour it in the soil and it runs off into the stream, that's one thing. But the carbon footprint of just creating fertilizers is significant, right? So, but there's a food aspect of it is amazing. Not only the amino acid profile, but you got an awesome fatty acid profile, right? Most of our food, our seed oils, canola, corn, soybean, have got a high omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid in it, and we need that. We need omega-6, but we also need omega-3, and there's very few things we get omega-3 from. Fish, for example, you remember your grandma or somebody telling you, hey, you eat your fish oils because it'll make you healthy. And it's like, and of course you try to eat it, and it's like, man, that tasted terrible. Because the fish oil went rancid, right? Of course it was terrible. But there's a lot to be said for omega-3. And the more we took a look at omega-3 and omega-6 and the relationship between omega-6 and omega-3 and how much we're getting, we need a lot more omega-3 in our systems, in our diet. Now, hemp is like flax. It is a different kind of omega-3 fatty acid than fish does. And fish has fatty acids, omega-3 fatty acids that are EPA and DHA. And they've got a name associated EPA and DHA, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not smart enough to remember them. But what hemp does is it has an omega-3 that's alpha-linolenic acid, which is ALA. And what your body does is it'll take the ALA and break it down into EPA and DHA, but it does it very slowly. Just doesn't do it as efficiently as we would like to. If we're looking for EPA and if we're looking for DHA like fish, plant-based proteins don't do a good job of getting you there very quickly. Whereas hemp has something called stearidonic acid, and that's another omega-3, and it helps break down ALA into EPA and DHA more efficiently. So when we look at that, if we're looking for EPA and if we're looking for DHA, if the fish oils are that good for you, how can we get, because there's not enough fish in the oceans to feed people the amount of EPA and DHA they have, right? And we've talked with people in the salmon markets and the fish markets, and it's all about, hey, how can we use hemp, for example, to feed salmon and some other things? But if you follow that path, it's like you will never get enough fish to provide enough protein and omega-3 to make a difference. You just can't. Logistically, you catch it in the ocean and you got to deliver it someplace in the middle of Africa. That makes it very challenging. And we're working in Africa right now on that issue. So from a food perspective, hemp's as good as it gets. I tell people you can live on hemp. It's a superfood. Unfortunately, people don't care. It's just beyond me how sick we are as a country, right? As a nation, we got the highest cost of health insurance, and we got more sick people. And I think you see Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Mhm.
talking about make America healthy again, right? It's because we are at a point, we are sick, and it's like, man, we've got to start making a difference. And people hear that, and I'm not sure if they don't quite understand it. But one thing about being a dad and a grandfather, hey
Mhm.
man, we're talking about my kids and my grandkids now, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I wouldn't do some things for myself, but you'll do things for your kids and your grandkids, right? And it's a
Right.
big motivator, right? So for me, it's like, hey, that's something that I think is significant. And
Mhm.
so this goes back to, hey, this is the hill to die on, man. If it's not for me, it's for my kids and my grandkids, right?
It's for the children of the world. I think this is what's really clear about this, and what I love about your story is that you know you're fighting not just for your own kids' future, the kids on the reservation, but the children around the world. IND Hemp is involved in some really amazing projects that connect hemp to fighting off malaria. Kind of, could you elaborate more on this
Yeah,
connection? This
yeah,
connection?
yeah. It
It's really
goes back to this. Every time you turn around, the goodness of hemp
yeah.
is something, right? And I was over in Ghana. Um, people in Africa would like hemp in Ghana, and
Hmm.
in Africa in general, right?
Hmm.
So we have some contacts in Ghana. We went over there to meet with some people. They're very interested in bringing hemp as a food over there to feed the children. And then we got to talking about what other issues you have over there, and over there, as in a lot of places in sub-Saharan Africa, it's malaria.
Hmm.
There's 250 million people going to get malaria this year, right? We got it last year, going to get it next year, right? And when you get malaria, it's one of these things, man. It's the worst flu you got. And in the back of your mind, you know that 600,000 people are going to die from malaria this year. Most of them are children. 80, 90% of those people, 600,000, are under 5. So, and I got kids, I got grandkids. They were all under 5. So, I can put a face to that
Yeah.
age. And when you're driving around Africa, you see all these babies, and they have got a real chance. 600,000 of them, most of them in Africa, are going to die.
Mm.
So we took a look at, gosh, and because I was like most Americans, right? You know about the malaria thing. It sounds like a bad deal, but you know what? I got to go to work in the morning, so that's good enough for me. So you
Exactly.
don't know what you don't know, and because it doesn't directly impact you don't get engaged because you got things every day to keep you busy,
Yeah.
And so we took a look at it, and it was like, what is this malaria thing? And we came across some old studies. One was like at 1907 or something like that, that showed that, hey, if you eat fish oils, that impacts your chances of getting malaria. And when I hear fish oil, I hear omega 3, right? And when I see omega 3, it says like hemp's got this omega 3 thing going with it. So maybe there's something hemp can do. And then we did some further research, and then in the mid 50s, they did some more research using omega 3 with some rats and some mice. And it found out that, hey, if you feed mice some of this omega 3, uh, the malaria goes away. Now, this is fish oil, right? And again, it's not the same thing, but it's kind of the same thing. So, from our standpoint, maybe there's an opportunity. And then in 2024, there was a study from China that showed the direct impact of using omega 3 and omega 6 to fight off parasites. And malaria is a parasite. And there's a whole laundry list of other parasites that omega 3 and omega 6 apparently can can impact. And so, from our standpoint, IND Hemp standpoint, it's like, hey, I don't know if it'll work, but I know it could work. And if it could work, why don't we try it? Because there's too many lives in the balance, too many people
Mm.
who deal with this every year. And from our standpoint, we don't have to fix everything, but we can find out if hemp can be part of the fix, right? And so we got some folks engaged with us who are also interested in this, right? We got the National Hemp Association, and we
Mhm.
sat down trying to figure out how we could put together a strategy for what we're doing in central Montana and how that might be able to impact people in sub-Saharan Africa. And it was like, hey, you know what? Let's reach out to the folks out there, because there's a tremendous infrastructure in place right now to deal with malaria in Africa. Right? They're handing out mosquito nets. They're handing out drugs. They're doing a lot of things, but 600,000 people are still going to die this year, right?
Right.
So it's like, I don't make mosquito netting, but we do make hemp oil. And if that omega-3 could help, we'll send them. So we're trying to work with some people. We will process and give you guys hemp oil. You get it in the hands of the people who are at risk in communities that are out in the bush. And you guys are already tracking this stuff, right? See if it makes a difference.
Right.
And and by the way, this isn't a drug. I'm not making up something that's, that the FDA's got to approve. This is food.
Right.
This is food, guys. And at the end of the day, if it does work, we'll come and show you how to grow it, right? Then you guys can do your own thing. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, and because from our perspective, it looks like hemp could provide, a protective opportunity where the omega-3 maybe just kills the parasites, right? And protects the host or these kids from getting it. But it's also got a therapeutic response. So if you do get malaria, the anti-inflammatory characteristics of hemp, be it in the ALA and the omega-3s or the omega-6 gamma-linolenic acid, they're both anti-inflammatory. And then our protein has got some cool things too. But if you get it, what they find is most kids that get malaria, your body has an over response, your autoimmune system overreacts, and in that process, it kills you. And so what we're trying to do is maybe this hemp could help from an anti-inflammatory perspective. So anyway, and for our standpoint, it's like all we got to do is try to find some people who want to engage with us. We will get you the oil. You guys tell us if it seems to work. It can't hurt. It cannot hurt. So let's do this thing together and see if it'll work. So we were over there. I was there 2 weeks ago. We started this a couple, 2 or 3 months ago in Ghana. And then 2 weeks ago, I was in Kenya meeting with university people there and some of the political types, trying to figure out how we can make it happen in Kenya. And then we went down to South Africa, and we're working with a hemp company down there, Mkuzi Hemp in Mkuzi, which is in KwaZulu-Natal, where the Zulu is. And they've got unbelievable farming opportunities down there. So our goal is maybe in South Africa, we can figure out what genetics work down there, and maybe we can grow it in South Africa. And then until we can figure out what works in Kenya and sub-Saharan Africa, maybe the South Africans can grow it and send it up there. Because, I don't see a sustainable opportunity where we're growing it in Montana and shipping it to, you know what I mean? That just doesn't make sense. So we're working with a seed genetics company out of Denver called New West Genetics, and Winnie Mosier and her team are just brilliant on this stuff too, right? And she's got a couple kids who are actually from Africa. She's got a couple adopted kids, so she's got a heart for doing all this kind of stuff. And so we've got a network of people who are working with us who want to make an impact, and we'll see where it goes. And all part of that God journey thing, right?
On a logistic question, from a logistic standpoint, is hemp conducive for farming in multiple different climates, or is it really only suitable for certain types of climates? Because Montana and sub-Saharan Africa, and of course sub-Saharan Africa is this huge place that has varying degrees of different types of climates within that.
Crazy.
Yeah. How variable is this plant? How suitable is this plant for different climates?
Yeah. We're going to find out, by the way. Because, in Montana, with our grain varieties, at 5:30, the sun is up. And the sun doesn't go down till 10:30. So figure out, you got 16, 18 hours of sunlight, and which is very good for the genetics. Our grain genetics come from Canada, right? And it's even more sunlight up there. So it does very good. That being said, those same genetics won't grow, let's say in Nebraska, because the photo period is not the same. And for those particular genetics, it just doesn't work. Fortunately, I mentioned New West Genetics. There are people out there who can create different genes within these plants, and some of them will, grow with less light, with less water, that kind of stuff. And so we're hopeful that, the smart people like New West Genetics and Wendy and her team, or others, because we're working with some folks in Africa, and they've got some smart people over there too. If we can just give them the seeds, get the seeds to them, because our fiber crops, the genetics come from Southeast Asia, Chinese varieties, right? We also have some that are Eastern European, Ukraine, Poland, and then there's some good genetics from the food aspects from Italy and France, and so there's genetics all over. And then there's some of these varieties that were planted in the U.S. back in the 30s, for example, and that's the stuff you find in the ditches, the road ditch, right? That's
Right.
when we were kids, you thought you were dealing with marijuana, remember? And it was like, nah, it never was marijuana. It was all this fiber hemp that they used to grow around. So anyway, I think over time, somebody's going to figure the genetics out to take care of any and all these problems.
Going back to the business of IND Hemp, what advice would you give a founder who's starting out in the hemp business now, knowing what you know and the journey that you've been on? And what are some of the larger roadblocks to scaling IND Hemp's business and impact moving forward?
Yeah, help remember those questions. But first thing I tell somebody is, man, don't try to do too much too quickly, because they get their expectations are just not right. They get investors who want to invest in this hemp thing, and there's a lot of great things that can happen, right? But when you tell people you're going to plant this seed and you're going to build that plant, and these people are going to buy our product, and we're going to make all this money, there is not a straight line in any of that, right?
100%.
So keep your expectations in check, and you'll never be as successful, I think, your first year as you thought you were going to be. But 5 and 10 years down the road, you're going to be amazed at what kind of success you have. It just takes hard work. It just takes time, because it's in the farming end of things. You never know if next year is going to be a drought year or if it's going to be a bumper year. And you just don't have any control over that. And then there are a lot of, there's so many good people in our industry. And if you want to get in the hemp industry, reach out to folks. The National Hemp Association's got some great people. The NIHC, National Industrial Hemp Council, good people. I'm engaged with the Hemp Feed Coalition, and it's like, find some people to talk to. Nobody is trying to prevent you from being successful. We all want you to be successful, right? So work with people who have been doing this for a while. And before you quit your day job, whatever you're doing today, and you want to get into hemp tomorrow, why don't you do a little bit more investigating and talk with the people who are actually in the industry and get some insight from them as to how would you do it, right? Because if you're sitting someplace that hemp doesn't grow, or if you think you're sitting someplace that you can get 3 crops of hemp because it's nice and warm down in Mississippi and Florida, and warm don't have nothing to do with the production of hemp, you ought to hear that from somebody who's tried that, right?
Oh.
Yeah, and keep your day job, and then keep working and work with people within the industry to get on a path that looks more like 5 years than 1 to 2 years, and you'll be a lot happier and less stressed in that process. And along the way, you're going to make some amazing friends. I got amazing friends who are in this business, and they're all over the country. And but you'd just be amazed at how good people can be.
What are some roadblocks to scaling the hemp industry in the United States overall, but of course IND Hemp specifically?
Yeah, I think our biggest issue is, as an industry, is still a political thing. We have, we've got the 2000, what is it? It's a 2023 Farm Bill that we're still working on. It's going to be 2025, and we're hoping it gets done. And we need to make sure we separate grain and fiber from the cannabinoid end of things, because if legislators, if your congressmen and your senators think you're talking about marijuana, they're not going to support it. And if you don't get support from the legislatures, it's just a struggle. So the biggest thing, I think, is if we could get the government to separate grain and fiber from the cannabinoid into things that would make us our end of the business better. And then, we just got to have markets open up, because it's not been a clear path on the legislative process and what the legal ramifications are. It's easy to say, Toyota. We want Toyota to build car parts out of hemp, right? And it's like, well, you guys don't grow enough hemp for us to even get excited about. Well, we can't grow enough hemp until we get more adoption within the industry, and we can't get that until the political situation gets a little better. But politics are changing a little bit. We're very hopeful that the 2025 Farm Bill gets passed and provides a clear path for everybody. And once that happens, then we just need more adoption by various industries, the food industry, the fiber industry. Like I said, if Toyota or BMW or John Deere would make car or parts out of it, that would change everything. If Starbucks decided to make a cup out of a renewable, sustainable product like hemp, as opposed to cutting down a bunch of trees and spraying them with plastic, like the Starbucks cup is not even recyclable. It's like if you could get Amazon, right? And the boxes you get from Amazon, right? Hey, how about make a hemp box?
Yeah.
And I think that's all coming. But as soon as we get something like that, it'll open up more and more opportunities for everybody.
Well, legislation can really be a lever to amplifying this change that we desperately need on multiple fronts, or it can be a hindrance to it and can prevent the innovation and can prevent this miracle crop from scaling and being beneficial to so many. From my limited understanding, I know traditional weed shops, like marijuana shops, are not, because of the federal jurisdiction around Schedule 1 drugs, they're prevented from accessing the financial system in the same way that other retailers or businesses are. Does that same prohibition impact you?
It did. It did. Yeah. When we first, this goes back to what Wells Fargo tell me I couldn't have an account with them, right? Because I'm obviously a marijuana guy, right? And so, it was real tough. And that's just one aspect of it. It was try to get a loan, can't get a loan. When you go into a community and talk to people about what you're doing, you're a drug company. You know what I mean? It's like, so anyway, those things have changed. They're changing. It's still got some of that legacy associated with it, but I think that's changing. That's why the industry, I think, is going to get better. Some of these things that we've had to deal with over the last 5 or 6 or 8 years, those are changing.
Last question on your end. What does the future entail for IND Hemp? What does success look like for you, Ken Elliott, and IND Hemp in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, for Ken, let's go Ken and Julie, my wife, right? And we are truly partners in this. She's been there the whole time and has supported it in every way she can, and she tolerates so much, and it's just a huge part of everything we do, right? And we're 65, so 10 years from now, God willing, I'm still around. We're wondering about this stuff. I think we'll look back. It's been an awesome opportunity, right? And we're just, I think it'll be good. All the things we thought we were going to do 5 years from now, hopefully over the next 10 years, we'll get them done. We've got so many good friends and great opportunities. I'd like to see us do more into Africa. In Africa, they absolutely want us there, right? Over there, they need good food. They need people to help them develop their communities, their economies, and things like that. And in the United States, I'm not sure if we need good food. People don't, there's so much push coming from the United States, be it legislation or industry. There's a lot of pushback on the hemp stuff, right? Whereas in Africa, there's pull. They want us in there, help us kind of thing. And so I'm hopeful. Africa is such a huge place with so much opportunity. I hope IND Hemp, and I hope hemp is over there doing some good things. So I'd like to see 10 years from now, me over there a little bit more. If you've never been to South Africa, it's an awesome place, man. It's awesome. Yeah, and we want to, we just as a family, we just want to do more of that, right?
Yeah.
And we're old enough to recognize that money is probably not the thing you ought to work all your life for,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get some of it, and you'll never have enough of it, right? That's the other thing about money is, right? You think, what is the number you need when you're 29, right? Yusuf, what number do you need, right?
Thoughts I'm actually having, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll never have enough because whatever number you put at 29 is going to be different at 30, and when you get to 45, right? So
For
you're
sure.
chasing numbers instead of a life, and so get on that path that's a journey worth walking, right? And so the journey is awesome, not necessarily whatever you think at the end of the journey should look like.
Amazing.
Yeah, so and I'm not even sure where the hell that go. Where was that in the question you asked me, right?
A good response, nevertheless. Again, this conversation is all about giving value to people who are aspiring to be where you're at, aspiring to be entrepreneurs, curious about agriculture, curious about sustainability, and of course, just want to think. Want to live life intentionally. And I think that, Ken, I want to again acknowledge you for this. I think you are, you're really living out, God's plan for you in the best way.
Well,
And
I think so. One of the encouraging thing I try to convey to people is, um, the mess we are in right now, right? It's not going to be fixed by the people who got us in this mess. We are not going to be fixed by the food companies or the agrochemical companies or the oil companies. It's not going to happen. There is no incentive for them to change, right? They got into their journeys years ago, and they are where they are. But all the other people who are 29, right? My grandson who's 19 and in college who's working with us, that's where the future is. Because it has to be, because you've got a vested interest in the future. Whereas these industries and these companies right now, they've got a vested interest in what the next quarterly results are going to be, right? What do I got to tell my shareholders? And we've got to make money this quarter, not next quarter, this quarter. Whereas when you're 29, and it's like, man, I do not like it the way it is right now. You are in a situation where you can start figuring out how you can make change over your lifetime, and that's there's a whole lot of hope in that, because we can hope on Yusuf and we can hope on the other people, but don't count on General Motors, don't count on ExxonMobil, don't count on the people who are doing things the way they're doing things, because they can't change. They just can't.